All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Hattrick Sports Talk. Unfortunately, Shane couldn't be here on yesterday, but we decided to record this today with my good friend, as always, Cole Hinkle. What's up, man?
Hey, hope everyone's staying safe. How you doing? Good to be on the show.
Yeah, good to have you in on such short notice. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, we're going with Brandin Cooks and the Texans getting him and a fourth round pick for the 57th overall pick in this year's draft. Let's start with the Texans side on this first. What do you think they're doing with this trade?
Yeah, Bill O'Brien is really kind of, to me, falling off the deep end. I don't know. This to me is you're acquiring a guy who has some upside. I can see where maybe, but to me, he's just one hit away from being like scrambled eggs. You know what I mean? Like I hate to use that like lightly, but like the guy has had some serious like concussion problems and stuff, and I can see it coming. I can kind of see where there's going to be a point where it's going to be too much for him, and I can see him stepping away or someone telling him he needs to step away. That being Brandin Cooks. But going back to like the Texans aspect, I mean, when you lose or when you trade away arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, you have to replace him with something, and I think they understood that. I just think what they got and the value they gave up was just too much, and I don't know that you're going to get as quality a player as you gave up.
I think you have to get Deshaun Watson some help, and I think this trade did it. I just feel really bad for Brandin Cooks, because when he was drafted and he went to the Saints, I really think that he was in the right spot in New Orleans, and him just getting moved around like crazy like this, I just don't like it at all. I think he needs a spot where he can really feel situated again, and Houston might be that spot with Deshaun Watson because I honestly think it could be quite good.
Yeah, I really hope so for his sake. I think you're right. I do feel that poorly for him that this is the way his career has gone. Um, I saw a tweet today. He kind of seems like the Tobias Harris of the NFL, where he's a very talented and still really young. I think he's only 26, but he's been traded so many times. It's weird to see, and it's weird to like have a guy with that much talent be traded around. I think you're right though. I think it would have been best for his career if he was able to stay in New Orleans. But hopefully you're putting him alongside if Will Fuller can stay healthy and Kenny Stills. It's a pretty fast wide receiver corps, and it can be pretty lethal with Deshaun Watson throwing the ball if everyone can stay healthy. So
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. As long as everyone stays healthy, it could be quite good for Deshaun Watson. But I think there's bigger problems in that organization that
yeah,
we're I guess pretty fully aware of at this point.
yeah, I agree.
With the Rams side, I legitimately don't think they're going to win the division or get even close to winning the division this year. I think they're the worst team in the NFC West. First off, you have in total with Todd Gurley and Brandon Cooks, you have 41.8 million in dead cap money. That's a really good portion of dead cap money. This cap situation for the Rams is dire at best.
Yeah, it's pretty treacherous. I think this is another example of we see teams kind of try to buy their way into a championship. We see it in the NBA with the Nets. They made a couple of trades and kind of got in some cap trouble, and you see it in the NFL multiple times throughout the last decade where teams have tried to kind of fast track it and buy their way into it. I just think this is kind of a reoccurring thing where there's nothing like going through the draft process and drafting the right guys and being able to have that sustained success. I think you can buy players and kind of fast track it for a year or two, but I think this is overall what happens when you try and just buy yourself some good players and you trade for too many good players and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate to see the Rams in the spot they are, especially when they were so good a couple years ago. You know what I mean? And it looks like I think you're right. I think they're on the downward trend here. And when you tie up all that cap and you're starting to have guys age and you're starting to have to trade away talented players just to have cap room, you're going to suffer a little bit. It's pretty unfortunate from where they were 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the most prime example of sort of buying your way into a title was the Broncos in 2013. I think they really were at the point where it's like, okay, we just need to get guys in here. Get guys, for example, like Malik Jackson, who I think they paid a couple year contract to about, 40, 50, $60 million. That's just one example. But at the end of the day, the result ended up being good in the sense that they won the championship, and the Rams, obviously, with the Patriots and that whole game. But that's the one thing. If the Rams won that game, I think we would have been looking at this much more differently as an unfortunate situation, which I think we thought about with the Broncos for the last few years, trying to figure out the quarterback spot.
Yeah, to your point, it's definitely a lot different when you can win one. You know, if you win it, it almost kind of justifies it in a sense. But when you don't win it, it really seems to put a stress on the other things. Like you're saying, though, I think the Broncos are a little bit different scenario when you have Peyton Manning at quarterback. You know what I mean? You're going to be in it for a couple years. People are still uncertain about Jared Goff. I just think, like I said before, to reiterate, it's just there's nothing quite like you're not going to get sustained success unless you're doing it through the draft and you're drafting the right guys, and you can be able to have that kind of 5-year run where you're really competing at a high level.
I also think a huge thing to your point with the drafting is that when you're able to draft the right guys, you have like a 3 to 4 year window of that group developing as like a core, and then adding some ancillary pieces as you go along through free agency, through some of your needs. But that helps you because you know that you can have a 4-year run of trying to make the Super Bowl and maybe winning one or two, compared to, we're just going to pay a bunch of these guys and then eventually we're going to be in cap hardship, basically.
That's the hardest thing for me about the Rams is because when you look at them, it looked like they did have a few key pieces in the right spots. You had Aaron Donald, taking up the defense. You drafted Goff. You drafted Gurley. It looked like you were starting to get some foundational pieces. It's just I think what they did wrong is I think they tied up their money too early. I think they needed to wait another year or two and see what they really had, and kind of when you've got those guys on a young contract like you had Goff and Gurley, maybe you go out and spend a little more money here or there somewhere else first, and then you wait to see what happens with those guys. Obviously, with the running back now situation, we see that running backs aren't exactly sustainable, for long periods of time being a workhorse back, So obviously, hindsight's 2020. We can go back and say that, but I think when you have those guys on those rookie deals, you really have to make sure you're making the right moves. Obviously, you'd like to get them extended while you can, so that way it's a little bit cheaper, but sometimes it's better to wait too, just to see what you actually have there.
Todd Gurley is a difficult part of this situation when you look at the Rams, because it's like he had, when he was 100% healthy, it seemed like Jared Goff was a better quarterback during that time. And then as he started sort of wearing down, they had to manage him a little bit. That offense, I think, really dissipated, especially last year.
Yeah, I think, to me, and I say this as a Niners fan, but I feel like Sean McVay has kind of ripped a page out of Shanahan's book. He comes from the Shanahan tree, and it really does. You need that run game going first for the quarterback to be successful. And I think they really need to get a workhorse back in there like immediately, so that way they can try and build that back up, like you're saying. Because Jared Goff is a much better play action passer than he is just a straight up like pocket passer. And I think if they can get back to his strengths, but you have to have that run game first for that to be effective.
I expect the Rams to sort of stick to what they have. So if you look at the latest reports and what McVay is saying, he's trying to get guys like Jared Everett the ball a little bit more. I'm really excited to see what Darrell Henderson can do at running back. I don't think he got a fair shot the last year or two. I think he has a chance to be a really good workhorse backer, even as the Niners have done over even last year. You had guys kind of shuffle in and out, and it worked for Shanahan's system and for Garoppolo. That's what the Rams are probably better suited to do right now, and I think McVay realizes that.
Yeah, probably just because of the resources available to them with, low cap and not a lot of draft picks. You're probably reverting, you're right, towards a running back by committee. And you're right. I think Darrell Henderson has good potential, and I think they need to get him more touches, which is why it was so weird last year when he wasn't getting a whole lot of touches, and neither was Gurley. It was like, well, what are we doing here? You know, you got to kind of swing it one way or the other. So it'll be interesting to see how they go going forward. I think you're right, though. I think they're not in a position to be able to really reach out and go get someone who's, you know, a proven running back per se, or even, you know, a wide receiver or anything. I think you kind of, like you said, you work Gerald Everett, you work some of the guys that you've drafted higher and haven't gotten their workload.
Yeah. And Henderson, I think, is a perfect example of that for sure.
Definitely.
When you look at also Clay Matthews and Gurley, Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, reported that they haven't gotten their bonus money, which I think is another piece to this that makes the Rams look a little bit dysfunctional over the last year or two. I didn't think we thought like, oh, they're a dysfunctional organization, but clearly there is some dysfunction going on, especially with that reporting earlier in the week.
Yeah, it's really odd to me, and I think you're right. I think dysfunctional this is like the first time we've kind of slapped that label on the Rams in their front office, where it's a little weird to me that a couple of guys now are coming out and saying they owe me money. You really don't hear a whole lot of that, and definitely I wouldn't have expected it from the Rams, but it's just an odd situation. I think you're right, where the front office is, I think to me they're kind of pulling in a little bit too many different directions. I think there's a lot of people who are worried about cap, and there's other people worried about going trading for Jalen Ramsey. You know what I mean? Acquiring talent. There needs to be a fine line where everyone can kind of understand what each other's doing. But to me, it just seems like there's too many people pulling in opposite directions, and I think that's where this kind of thing is coming from. But obviously, with their cap situation and their money, you know, this is probably where this is stemming from, just because they're already short on, you know, resources. I don't think obviously they owe them that money, but there's going to be a little bit of delay in how they're going to go about these things.
And then there's another piece of this too, of just the whole LA thing, right? The stadium is stopped being built at this point, but will get done eventually. And then you look at the Chargers and what's going on there, and now look at what the Rams are at. You're going into a new stadium without any hype, really. And I don't think we expected this from the Rams anyway. Like, we thought there would be some hype there. There doesn't seem to be that. And when you have a new stadium, especially in Los Angeles with so many things to do, that could be really tough for them to actually sell tickets and create some revenue, regardless of the situation we're in right now.
Very true. I didn't necessarily think about that aspect of it, but you're right. Creating that revenue just based off of tickets, sales, jersey sales, that type of thing. It seems like the hype has really died down overall on this team, and it's going to be hard for them to be able to create that revenue that you're talking about.
All right, so moving on to another NFC West team where a former player on this team, the Seahawks, with Jadeveon Clowney. It's pretty clear now that he will not re-sign with Seattle. They offered him a deal, didn't accept. He's still looking for about that maybe 16, 17, 18 million range, going down from 20. He's willing to sign a much shorter contract. Do you think that is likely? And what team fits Clowney best moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's obviously with the Seahawks situation, it became apparent over time that the longer this thing went on, I think the likelihood of him re-signing here drastically went down. I think more and more guys now, though, are going to be signing shorter deals, prove-it type of deals like you're talking about, just because they look at the way the NFL is structuring things, and in a couple of years the cap is going to rise, so you're going to be able to get more money. A guy like Melvin Gordon, I think that's why he took a shorter deal, stuff like that. But as far as Clowney goes, I just think that people are realizing that the stats aren't worth – I understand he's a very talented player, but when you're only racking up what he had 4 sacks last year, it's not exactly be able to spend that 20. People just don't want to get tied up in that type of cap like they have before in like one guy. And I just think the stats speak to that.
I keep going back to this. The Seahawks, about midway through the season, were number one in instant pressure. A lot of that was Clowney. And I think a lot of teams are still worried about the core injury. But I have a tremendous issue with this idea that defensive linemen are getting too expensive and are not worth it. Case in point, Khalil Mack in Oakland. Obviously a much different situation, but the Raiders didn't want to pay that money when obviously you should have gotten that money. I think once we got, and I mentioned this before on the podcast, I think once that Ndamukong Suh contract happened in Miami and that didn't work out, it changed how every GM views defensive linemen, I think for absolutely no reason. And I think that's a huge reason why Clowney's market has been so low.
Yeah, I think you make a fair point. I think after Sue, a lot of people did view it differently because his production really tanked. I don't know that there's a whole lot of defensive linemen, especially like pure pass rushers, that have quite fallen off like he did, and it probably did scare a lot of people. I still think I think there should be that much value. I agree with you. There should be that much value on pass rushers just because I think it is so crucial in today's NFL to be able to rush the passer and, like you said, get instant pressure. Clowney, to me, though, like I said, the stats, when you're not racking up sacks and you talked about, you're talking about injury concern pretty much every year, that to me is probably where the distancing is between, him and other teams. Just speaking, I keep referencing it, but going back to the 49ers, it's the same thing. I felt a little frustrated with Dee Ford's contract this year. He's getting over 20, and I think that's what Clowney thought. He's looking at a Dee Ford type contract and going, I'm as good as him. But then teams are looking at it and going, well, Dee Ford wasn't on the field for every game this year, and he wasn't exactly productive except like the first half of the season. You know what I mean? So it's hard for teams when they see the recent deals, and I think that's what he's doing is probably comparing it to recent deals. But then teams are looking at some of the recent deals like a Dee Ford and saying, well, we're not exactly getting our value. But there's still value to having someone who can stay healthy and get that production. It's just, are you going to be able to stay healthy? I think is the big thing with him.
Where does he go in your mind?
To me, I've heard Cleveland a lot lately. I don't know that I necessarily like that fit, though. I just think they've already got Olivier Vernon. You got Myles Garrett.
He hasn't been good either, by the way.
He hasn't, but I just think that, like, you're just adding too much money to a group that's already pretty solid. You know what I mean? I think they have way bigger needs on, let's say, offensive line, secondary help, stuff like that. I think that they should be spending their money. I can't necessarily think of a team that I think it really fits. I mean, maybe you could go back to Miami, where he was originally thought to go. I've heard the Jets. I think that makes somewhat of an okay deal, but
I think you have to look at the New York teams. I think you have to look at the Jets and the Giants. I think the Giants is tough because they have to pay Leonard Williams, and I know he hasn't been productive necessarily in terms of sacks, but I still think he's worth a good amount of money. So I think that rules out the Giants. And then with the Jets, I think historically the Jets are a team that love to build on their defensive line. It just hasn't gone over the last, 4 or 5 years the way they would have hoped. But I think that's why the Jets make a lot of sense.
Yeah, just speaking off of like a team that really needs it, it's probably makes the most sense just because they have the money. They need it probably more than a lot of the other teams listed. So to me, that's probably where it fits.
Okay, so I don't know if you've seen the highlights of Tua's pro day. Maybe you've seen a few clips of it.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit.
Tua and his injury concerns have continued to be a big topic in the news as we get closer and closer to the draft. Michael Lombardi said the question to be asked is not if Tua is healthy, but rather if he can stay healthy. And he said being cleared to play and being able to play are two different circumstances. Is that something that you think we haven't talked about much? Is this idea that, he may be healthy, but is he actually fit and being ready to play on the field and be effective in week one when we get to week one?
Yeah, I think we've done a fair analysis of it. I mean, obviously we've said stuff like whatever team he goes to, he should probably sit. That's speaking from you and me. What conversations I've had with you, I think it's best for him to sit just to fully heal. I don't know how many NFL organizations are saying to themselves, day one, he'll be ready, we're going to go. that type of thing. You know what I mean? But I saw a report today that also said some of Tua's doctors and stuff said that people need to understand that, like, there's been multiple doctors that have cleared him. So I think he's a farther along than we think, but I still think in his best interest and in the team's best interest, like you're saying, cleared and healthy to play is two different things. And I think he might be healthy enough to play, but it's better to give him that extra rest.
I think at this point, with everything that's happened, two things. One, I do feel like he'll play week 1. I think we've gone to the point where he's probably healthy enough. Well, yeah, being able to play is a much different thing. I do feel like whoever drafts him will play him right away. And two, unless there's a trade up, which at this point there won't be, I am 90% sure, based on all the reports, that Tua will not go in the top 10. That's about as far as I have right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you and me had talked about. I just can't see him not going top 10. That's why I feel like where I see him going and fitting is in Miami.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that situation with Fitzpatrick being there, that's the best scenario for him to be able to go somewhere and sit, like we're talking about. But like you're saying, if doctors are clearing him and stuff, I still don't think Miami specifically, which is where I have him pegged, has that need to rush him into that scenario.
Yeah.
Where some of the other teams might say, well, he's healthy, he's cleared, let's put him out there.
I think more than likely Miami is now firmly with Herbert. I think at this point, number 1's definitely Burrow. I think number 5 at this point, unless some moving and shaking goes around, it's going to be Herbert to Miami. Even though I don't agree with it, you and I have spoken, as we did earlier in the week with the mock draft, that we don't believe that's the right move. I am fairly certain that will happen. And then I think by that point, Tua is just going to start falling tremendously. I think he's just going to go way down.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like I said in the mock draft too, I just can't see it. That type of talent slipping past top 10. I think someone is going to take a chance, just if history repeats itself. So there's not been a whole lot of guys like that people just let fall that far. You know what I mean?
I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you, but I just feel like teams aren't as confident. I just think that the confidence level of teams, like, I don't think GMs want to take a risk, even if there clearly is no risk based on reports.
I just think that there's too many GMs that are on kind of like a hot seat where it's like, I got to start moving now. And I think this is the type of guy where, like I said, if you hit on it, it's a home run. You know what I mean?
I agree. But I think if I'm honestly, I'm so confused by what the GMs are thinking. But I think if most GMs right now are thinking, I'm not willing to sacrifice my job and my future to pick up Tua, and then potentially there's a massive injury concern that we have no clue about, or that the hip isn't perfect, even though it clearly is, again. But I'm just saying from a GM perspective, I think GMs are like, I'm not so sure. I'm not sure I believe all these reports. Based on my scouts are telling me this could be a year of him sitting, as you said, and I don't think I want that if I'm a GM, or how a GM might think. And I think that's why he falls out the top 10, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I think you're right. Me speaking personally, I wouldn't be comfortable with it. I'm looking at previous drafts and where I've seen guys with this kind of talent go, and I just think there's going to be one in the room that says, I'm going to go all in. I'm saying so. I don't know that I would, but I'm saying I just feel like there's going to be one that says, I'm going to go all in.
I hope there is one, but I don't think there is. That's all I'm saying. So moving forward with the draft as well, what are your thoughts on it being like a virtual draft? How do you feel that's going to work? What are you concerned about? Certain pieces with it? How do you feel? How does it sit with you?
Yeah, like you and me were talking about, and in that draft, the mock draft, it's going to be a little weird, and I think it takes away some from guys when it's you get to shake Goodell's hand and you get to kind of go through that process. It's definitely going to be a little bit weird, but as we said, ratings I think are going to be through the roof just because there's nothing else on. But to me, it really takes away from the players, and I do feel bad for the players just because of what that feels like to most players throughout history, and they're going to be probably one, if not the only, group to not be able to have that type of moment.
Yeah, no, I agree absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. Just that moment and what it means for these prospects. And that's why I feel like we don't need to do the draft in April, personally. I feel like we should wait and do it in August because who cares, really? We're not going to have OTAs or preseason or training camp. I'll tell you that right now. Then there's no point of having a draft in April.
I'm with you. I would like to see it pushed out a little bit just to see, if it clears up to where this type of thing can happen. And you're right. If we're not going to have OTAs and all that kind of stuff, there's really no point in planning on this happening. You know what I mean? It's just, if you're not going to have one, there's really no point to the other almost.
Yeah. And then I'm more, and from the GM perspective as well, they're concerned about certain issues potentially. I know some GMs have been worried about sort of some IT infrastructure issues. I'm not sure what to believe with this, but if you're a GM, are you concerned about it at all?
I'm sure you're a little bit antsy about it, being that it's never been done this way, and you're, let's say it's your first couple years being a GM, you're probably a little bit nervous, you know what I mean, just because of the fact that you don't know how this thing is necessarily going to go. But I don't see too much concern for it. But
And then on top of it as well, it would be funny if like teams are like, and I've heard this before, like early in the week from somebody, and I was like, this is actually hilarious. A team might go, "Oh, I messed up this first round pick. It was because it was an online draft."
yeah.
And like use that excuse. I'm like, bro, no, like you can't do that. You can't go up to your owner and say that. You just can't do that.
We messed up. That would be pretty funny.
I don't want to see that. I'm not going to be happy if we're here in like 6 months time going, this one draft pick was terrible and the GM is because it was an online draft.
Yeah, he blames it all on the draft. That's not what I wanted. Yeah, that would be pretty good.
All right, so some broadcasting news, surprisingly, that came out yesterday. Drew Brees has signed with NBC over ESPN when his career ultimately ends, which makes this a little bit interesting. But Drew Brees to NBC, what are your thoughts on that?
I think this goes to show how far away ESPN is from actually like obtaining a like top level analyst. I just think this is more on ESPN than it is on Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, all these names we've been hearing. You know what I mean? I think there's some serious discomfort with signing with ESPN for some reason. And you probably know more about this than me. I don't really know why, but I don't know what kind of infrastructure these like NBC and these type of things have versus ESPN.
It's very simple. So 4 or 5 years ago, remember when FS1 started, right?
Mm.
All of the ESPN execs moved over to Fox for that transition. Virtually all of them. Top executives from that ESPN department at Disney moved over to Fox. And that's why you saw guys like Colin Cowherd move over, Skip Bayless move over. That's a huge reason why.
Oh.
Secondly, there is partially, and if you look, let's look even at Stephen A, right? Stephen A is on ESPN a lot, right? He does First Take. He does the Sports Center before NBA games normally, right? And he just does a lot of work for the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing with ESPN, simply put, is that if you're signing with ESPN, you're doing a lot more work than if you were to sign with NBC, Fox, all these other networks, because it is a 24/7 focused sports network. and sort of the gravitas that comes with it. You're just on TV a lot more. Stephen A's on Get Up. He's on First Take. He's on that Sports Center show. You get what I'm saying? That's probably the most perfect example I can go with.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Yeah, now that you're saying that, I can see the bigger range you have to be able to, kind of cover rather than your kind of niche or,
Yeah. And it's also I think part of it is the whole Disney thing that comes with it. I don't know how much that interferes with what they do, but there's definitely some sort of, as I said, structural issues even that push some of these analysts away from joining ESPN rather than actually going into ESPN. That's part of the reason why I do feel like they need to go into more of a younger broadcasting pool. That's why I've always said, like, I'm willing to work for ESPN or any of these networks, but I do wish they focused on a much more younger broadcasting pool and try to develop that than try to go after some of these bigger names. And I heard Bill Simmons talk about this on his pod as well. I think one of the most interesting things about this analyst job or even a play-by-play guy and stuff like that is that why is it that we can't pinpoint certain people? I think the huge reason is because the broadcasting industry, unfortunately, doesn't really let people sort of come up, especially at a younger age, and kind of figure it out. Because so many of the guys, the Masters was going on, the Masters was supposed to be this weekend. And the Masters, Jim Nantz did parts for the 1986 Masters. It was one of the most famous Masters ever. And then, of course, last year, he's like the main guy there doing the Masters for Tiger's big win, which is, of course, another historic Masters. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of the same guys, and then it's just not building up the younger people who are trying to get in this industry. And that's why it is a difficult industry to get into, but a lot of those younger broadcasters, I think, need to be propped up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think to your point, though, I think it's getting to that point where they're going to have to start picking from that younger pool just because, like we say, the amount of guys that have just completely just said, I'm going to go somewhere else or something. But it does kind of take away from the broadcasting when, like you say, it's kind of like a old boys group where it seems to be the same. There's not a lot of younger up and coming talent. But maybe that's something, like you said, where ESPN can kind of be the first ones to kind of pick from a younger pool and start to develop some younger broadcasting talent and then keep them there long term. So that way they kind of have that pull.
Yeah, and even, I think even from an analyst perspective, any sport really, there's so many guys. Chris Sims is a great example. Chris Sims is a guy who was on Bleacher Report with Adam Lefkoe. NBC got him. And you really see how he's developed as a broadcaster over that time as well. So some of these guys who weren't really successful NFL careers necessarily come into broadcasting and really put themselves in a really good spot because his content's been great with Mike Florio as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see. So, and then also speaking of Monday Night Football, Chris Fowler and Curb Herbstreit, who does the Saturday night college football games, they're probably now the top candidate for Monday Night Football. Do you like this, Herbstreit and Fowler?
I personally really like Herbie. I think he's a really good analyst, and I think he does a really good job with college football. Obviously, when you get used to hearing someone talk about a certain subject for so long, you kind of think of them in that way. So I think it would be interesting to hear him give some NFL stuff. But I think overall he's really good at what he does, and I think he gives a more of a schematics like kind of stance rather than a lot of announcers today just are kind of doing generic play-by-play. So it'd be kind of interesting to get a guy like that in there where he comes at it from more of a scheme and number standpoint per se. You know what I mean? And I just think he has the right type of, it sounds generic, but like voice and kind of attitude for it. And I think he's really good at it. So if I had a pick at this point for ESPN, it would be Herbstreit because I think he is very fluid and he does a good job on, like we said, Saturdays for college football.
And I think Fowler as well, too. Him with Herbstreit has been an amazing combo over the last few years. He's done some tennis stuff as well. He's the main guy for the Australian Open, the French Open, the U.S. Open. it's really cool how multidimensional he is over the guys who were in the broadcast booth last year. With the play-by-play guy, he normally does boxing, so I'm very used to that. And then
Yeah,
hearing
Joe Tessitore.
Tessitore, yeah, I'm really used to his boxing commentary. So every time I've watched Monday Night Football over the last couple of years, that's always sort of thrown me off for some reason, compared to Fowler, where I'm used to him doing tennis, which I really love. And of course, I'm more of the women's fan in the tennis side than the men's side. But even so, I really love his tennis commentary, but also he does that. He's really good with football too. So he's really multidimensional in that sense. And I think for both Fowler and Herbstreit going up to the NFL, I don't think it would be much of an issue at all. I think it would be great. I think people wouldn't have too much of an issue with it.
Yeah, I think they'd be pretty fluid. But like you said, I think Fowler and Herbstreit working together is really a huge plus that I don't think ESPN necessarily sees, because like you said, when you get Joe Tessitore and you bring in Jason Witten and you got Booger, who's been doing college football, you're getting it was just too like clashing the last couple of years. They don't seem to be necessarily on the same page, where at least these guys have worked together and seem to have somewhat of a rapport with each other.
And I don't think there's this whole thing of like, oh, they're college guys and they don't know the NFL. No, I think they actually know the NFL really well, even though they've been in the college game for a long time. And I think that transition is a lot more easier than you said, and I think ESPN even thinks. I think it's perfect. I've always said, like, when I was watching the national championship game, I think last year, I was like, this is the perfect Monday Night crew. Like, I don't understand why this is so difficult. This is the perfect crew for Monday Night Football. And then have Lisa Salters on the sidelines. I think it's perfect.
I agree. I agree. I think this is actually a pretty good option for them.
And then when it comes to what do you do with the main head at college football, I mean, there's so many options. College, actually, for ESPN has a much deeper pull because they focus so much on college. I mean, they got the SEC package. That also partially might be why they're so hesitant to move them up to Monday night, is because they got the SEC package and they want top commentators for the SEC package. But in reality, I think you can get any one of those other groupings below Fowler and Herbstreit to do those Saturday night games. And I think people will be happy with it because, honestly, they have an amazing pool of commentators down there for sure.
Yeah, I think like you kind of touched on, the poll that they're going to have from, like you said, SEC or, whatever, they have more of that in college football that they can pick from than they do for like a good Monday night crew. It's just, you got to outweigh kind of your options and where you're looking, and to take away from one, you need to make sure that you're going to cover the other. And I think this allows them to be able to cover the other one without.
Yeah. I'll also bring up another guy as well. If you remember the Pro Bowl 2 years ago, it was Tessitore. Actually, it might have not been Tessitore. Actually, I'm not sure. But I think it was Tessitore and Matt Hasselbeck. I think Matt was actually really good during that Pro Bowl. Obviously, I don't watch the Pro Bowl that much.
Yeah.
And the Pro Bowl is obviously a lot more fun to commentate. But regardless, I really liked what he did. And I think that's one of the things I think ESPN is neglecting, a lot of that in-house talent, even for NFL Live. Guys like Louis Riddick, guys like Steve Young, and Matt Hasselbeck, Tim Hasselbeck even. Those in-house guys that they have for NFL Live, I think could be perfect for analyst roles as well.
That's true. I didn't think about that. The crew that they have, even for like Monday Night Countdown, they have Susie Colbert, and you said Matt Hasselbeck, Randy Moss. Like they are actually a pretty good crew that I think Matt Hasselbeck does a really good job, and I think that's a name to probably look out for moving forward if this kind of thing doesn't fall through.
Yeah, so that's just a couple of things to put out there as well. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, UFC 249 canceled, actually surprisingly, by the Disney executives and the whole heads at ESPN. We'll get to the first question first. What is your reaction to the UFC 249 being canceled? By the way, it was supposed to be at an Indian reservation in California.
Yeah, so obviously from a fan standpoint, it sucks. I've wanted to see fights. I've been craving for live sports. But overall, I think this is probably the more logical thing to do with everything else being shut down. Like you and me had talked about before, if everything else is shut down, maybe it's time to look in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe we need to close it down for a bit too. And we had talked about the health concerns for the fighters and that kind of thing. I think that's the number one thing you have to look out for when you're running a business is your employees. I think you need to make sure that as an employer, you're doing a good job to secure your employees. And I think this is what this obviously does is it secures, the health of your employees. Obviously, we heard Rose Namajunas, family member had died from coronavirus. Obviously, it's a little touchy there. You know what I mean? But you want to make sure that people are staying safe in a time like this. So this is probably the move to make, if you're looking at an overall standpoint.
This entire thing was really strange from the get-go. The Fight Island thing, which, by the way, is still going to happen. So I imagine in a month's time we're going to have fights at whatever this island is, because that infrastructure is now going to take about a month to build. As Dana has said, he'll do a fight at that reservation, which, by the way, will be one of the most unique atmospheres ever. If you remember the old UFC back in those days, how they did those fights, that's how that's really going to feel. So I'm really excited to see them do, hopefully, a pay-per-view at that reservation, because I think it will be a lot different and really fun atmosphere. But I can't believe it took Disney execs to say this is not safe. I didn't like how Dana really approached the situation at all.
Yeah, like you said, I think Dana kind of jumped the gun, and like I said, it was a money grab at first, and I think he's been told by multiple people that you really gotta tone it back, and I think overall, like I said, this is what had to be done. Obviously, as a fan, you want to see fights happen, but you're right. It will be interesting to see that island too. I really do want to see how that shapes out and how Dana works that too. So
Yeah,
it gives us something to look forward to in the meantime.
it will be very interesting. I'm sure by the first couple weeks in May, we'll really get an idea of what that island and that whole atmosphere is like. That's going to be really, really strange.
It will.
Kind of fun. Okay, so also speaking of which, I did want to talk about this since we kind of had some talk with ESPN and all that stuff. How do you personally feel about this whole ESPN, ESPN Plus, UFC relationship so far? Since it's been about like 6 months to a year since they've done that, and now you see the Disney executives wanting him to stop and him following that. But what has your feeling been about this partnership? Because Dana's been adamant that it's been really, really good. But how has it been, in your opinion, from a fan perspective?
Yeah, like you said, Dana's been adamant that it has been really good. Just speaking as a fan, though, I don't really like it. I don't really like the ESPN Plus, all this kind of different avenues that they're trying to work. I will say, though, as a fan, I really do enjoy being able to watch UFC fights on ESPN or SportsCenter. They can actually show highlights now because they have the rights to these type of things, when you're watching SportsCenter late at night and you can actually see what happened in some of the fight rather than just seeing – it used to just be a picture of, like, one guy punching another one and they do commentary, and it was just, like, it was really hard to watch. So, I mean, that aspect of it is nice. But I just don't like how they, like, set up pay-per-view through ESPN Plus and all these kind of different avenues that they're trying to work it. It seems a little bit, like, repetitive, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of stale to me. I like the old FS1 setup a little bit better, but I also enjoy being able to watch it on SportsCenter.
I think one of the best things ESPN has done over the last year has been how they've done the commentary, the post-show setup, Ariel Helwani, bringing him in, bringing in Chael Sonnen. I think that pairing of those two has been incredible. I think what they've done from a broadcasting standpoint has actually been remarkable. But I do feel that, and I think we've had this discussion many of times, and I feel the same way with boxing as well. I feel like combat sports as a whole has gone to a point where they need to sort of take the NFL model and go on local TV and have these big fights on ABC, for example, for ESPN, right? Or even just put it on ESPN for a cable audience. I think that makes more sense from a viewership standpoint, because imagine Connor on ESPN. And I think the viewership would be better. I think the revenue actually would be better. I just never really enjoyed the pay-per-view model, and now how it's changed with all these subscription services. You got ESPN Plus, you got the Zone. We're not just talking about MMA here. We're talking about boxing same way. But I just thought that the pay-per-view model needs to start going away when it comes to these fights.
I agree. As the sport is evolving, I think it's becoming more and more apparent that they do need to advance the way they're broadcasting these things. And I think you're 100% right. Just basic on TV would generate more revenue just because more people would watch it. I still feel like, and I've said this to you before, you get people going to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch fights, but if people could stay home, I feel like you double or triple the amount of people watching. You know what I mean? Because it's more of a pain for people to have to go through this type of thing. And like you're saying, the revenue they're going to get from advertisements and stuff like that is going to make up for more than the pay-per-view.
And let's not forget, these internet services, DAZN, ESPN Plus, they haven't worked perfectly at all. I mean, there's people who are buying these fights, paying $60 multiple times to try to get these fights, and the infrastructure just isn't there to support the amount of people paying for it. And what's worse is the fact that they are paying for it and it's not working the way they would hope, other than, oh, here's Conor, Conor Khabib on ESPN or ABC at 5 o'clock. Main card starts at 5 or I guess 7. There it is. It's on your TV. And then there's more social engagement with that. Not saying that there isn't social engagement with the UFC. I mean, UFC is #1 trending every pay-per-view card. But just to have that option is so much easier for everybody involved.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Just speaking, like you're saying, from a boxing standpoint, I paid to watch the Floyd Conor fight, and it lagged for like 2 minutes when it was first starting up, and I was panicking. And luckily
Everyone was panicking. It was broken.
Yeah, luckily enough, I got it to work, and I could watch the fight. But I couldn't imagine if this was like a service that I was like paying monthly for. And like you're saying, they just don't have the infrastructure to be able to have that many people watching on the site or whatever, and it just crashes or lags or whatever. It would just make a lot more sense, and they would have a lot more people, I think, watching and happy, and the sport would grow more if they would just do it from a local standpoint.
And then it not only comes back to us as fans, but the fighters. I mean, the exposure of, let's say, even the Conor Khabib fight of a guy like Derek Lewis. Now, yes, that was a pay-per-view card, but imagine every fighter and every new name you get to learn based on the fact that you're watching these fights on local TV. The amount of things that helps with the fighter in terms of sponsorships, in terms of just general more revenue options for these fighters that honestly they don't have right now.
100%. 100%.
So for the fighters, it makes more sense. If you're the UFC, I mean, you've only been in this business for 25, 26 years. You know what I'm saying? So because you've been in the business for, let's be realistic, a much shorter amount of time than any of the other major sports other than the MLS, you would put yourself at a much better advantage if you can put more fights on cable, on local TV, put more highlights out there, things of that nature, to help these fighters. And by helping these fighters, more fighters grow in popularity, more people watch, more engagement, and more money goes into not only the fighters' pockets, but UFC's pockets as a whole.
That's the thing, though. You can fast track this a lot more than, like you said, the MLS or something, because this is the top in the world. So you're going to be able to have a lot more pull than a thing like that. And you're right, if they did it that way, it's just you're like you said, when you've only been around for such a short period of time compared to other, you need to get yourself up to where the other groups are, and you're only going to be able to do that if you take away this kind of pay-per-view model.
Absolutely, for sure. We're both in agreement on this, but you and I both have been so adamant about this for years.
Yeah, we have.
So this is something that we've been calling for a long time.
Danny
All right,
needs
let's
to
get to some NBA stuff here. The Bulls have their new executive VP of basketball operations, Artis Karvanis, I think is how you say the name. He was the Nuggets GM. If you're part of the Bulls organization, what steps do you take to get this team to a title contender sooner rather than later?
Uh, to me, if I'm stepping in as the Bulls GM, I'm looking more towards a rebuild. I know it sounds early and it sounds premature, being that the fact that they have some young core pieces intact. I just think that you're. I just feel that the pieces you have in place aren't going to be able to get you to where you need to be if you're the Chicago Bulls and you have kind of that rep of Michael Jordan and all that type of paralysis or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you're better off. I think they have too many guys that get stats, but it's not leading to wins. And I think this year specifically really spoke to that. I think Zach LaVine is a really good, talented young player. I just don't know that he's going to translate to winning. Same thing with Lauri Markkanen. I know it's early to say this on these guys, but I'm just saying I think you're closer to a rebuild than you are to be able to just bring in a couple of guys and say we're close to being a contender.
A huge part of the issue organizationally is Jim Boylan, the head coach. The way that he's operated it in this really weird old school way of this hard practices, which doesn't happen anywhere anymore, not in the NFL, NBA. I think you can speak to this as a coach, even though you don't coach NBA. Just the practices are a lot more lighter, and it's just easier for these players being more flexible, being more mobile, that practices don't need to be as hard. And then obviously in the preseason, the punch clock. What are we in the 80s? The punch
Yeah,
clock thing.
that was terrible.
I bet you can speak to this as well. Like the low amount of practice time is actually more beneficial for these players. Do you believe that as a coach?
Oh, 100%. I think the less you're just taking torque off their body to be able to perform when they need to perform. You know what I mean? You can get stuff out of practice, and I believe that as a coach, you can get good stuff out of practice. But I think more or less, especially at an NBA type of stage, these guys pretty much understand, when they need to be going 100%. And I just don't know that you're going to be able to get that even get it out of them out of practice. And I think you're only draining that. You're not going to be able to sustain that type of energy level and that type of thing over a course of a season. And then come game night, you know what I mean? If you had an off day and your coach is running you all day, it's not sustainable for you to be able to go into a game and feel fresh. You know what I mean? And especially like you said, in today's NBA where more teams are going towards these light practices, everyone basically, you're working backwards. You're working against yourself where these other teams are getting rest. You're not getting rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I want to bring up this other thought I just thought about as well. You and I had a pretty good discussion about this a few months ago about let's go to a guy like Patrick Mahomes and his ability to, this is a much separate topic, but his ability to throw the ball and more baseball background. Same with guys like Russell Wilson. With the younger generation, playing sports at a high level, there's a lot more parents and people being like, all right, if you're going to play football, stick with it at a really young age, or baseball, stick with it at a really young age and don't play other sports. How do you feel about the value of players playing at a young age multiple sports and doing multiple things? And how do you think that helps them when they finally get to a point where they can pick an individual sport?
Yeah, I kind of forget we had this conversation, so that I might say something that you don't think is going to be said. But I enjoy players being able to play multiple sports at a young age. I think it's beneficial to be able to learn different aspects of different games and how to communicate differently and life lessons that you learn in each game. But more importantly, I think the biggest thing with that, and especially I can kind of tie it into the topic we're talking about now, is when, like, let's say a guy wants to play baseball starting at age 8 and his parents say you're only playing baseball year round. Now you're putting so much torque and stuff on your elbow and on your shoulder that you might not be ready by the time when you could be ready. You know what I mean? And that's said in basketball too. If I'm running these guys 100% all the time, maybe when I need them and it's game 81 of 82 and I need them to pick it up, it might not be there anymore. You know what I mean? And there's something to be said for having different muscles working at different times, going back to, like a baseball perspective, a little kid, if he's playing soccer in the off season, it's good for him to be able to get maybe that endurance from the soccer, and then transition away from throwing a ball so much to where his arm doesn't feel like it's going to fall off,
Yeah.
or stuff like that. I think it's just more beneficial to have sort of an off season. Obviously that's becoming a lot harder with guys playing year round. The talent level is rising and there's more guys doing it 100% all the time. So it's harder. It's almost virtually impossible to do now. Pick one. You're almost forced to pick one or two sports from a young age and kind of stick it out. But to me, I just think it's more beneficial when you can kind of dip your toes in each of the pool. And I think that also helps you really decide which game you love. You know what I mean? When you can play all of them, because guys do get burnt out of doing one sport all day, every day. So.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of this is as well is just like, and as I said, as I mentioned, guys like Mahomes, guys like Russell Wilson, the idea of being able to play baseball. I mean, you see Mahomes' arm and how he moves it. It's so much different because he comes from a baseball background. Russell Wilson with his sliding ability, same thing. All these sports can connect to what you're actually going to be ending up playing as probably, I guess, I'm not sure where you would end, probably like high school or maybe a little bit after high school, maybe college, and then you pick a sport and you just stick with it. But all of these elements can really help you in the sport you actually ended up choosing and playing long term.
Definitely. There's aspects to every different game that really do translate that people don't understand to different games and different levels of, sports and stuff like that.
All right. Finally, a couple more things before we have a little bit of fun. I have a few pictures here, and we'll talk about them. We'll have some fun. Are you excited for the horse competition tomorrow?
To be 100% honest, I can't say that I am. I'm a little more excited just because of the fact that we don't have live sports, but it's going to be pretty hard for me to watch a horse competition online, just being 100% honest. But, I'm a basketball junkie, and I'll kind of take what I can get at this point. But what about you?
I just think this is getting ridiculous. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need, like, the NBA 2K tournament thing. I was like, bro, like, chill out. Like, and then, like, I'm like, okay, what are we doing here, man?
I'm with you. Yeah, it's like, yeah, there's kind of a line where it's like this is getting a little bit ridiculous, but
And I think part of it too, and one of the things that I really enjoyed. So it is Masters weekend, and this is one of the toughest weekends for me because I really do enjoy watching the Masters.
mm-hmm.
And it's as people say, it's kind of like the start of spring for us sports fans. It's a huge thing that's smack dab in the middle of April and all those things. But seeing how creative CBS, ESPN, all these other networks have been with these old tournaments, old games, and just enjoying that. Like today, you had Jim Nantz and Phil Mickelson uh, basically watching that Masters together, the 2004 Masters where Mickelson won, and you get Mickelson's insight into it, and you kind of and for me it's a lot different because I was 4 during that
Yeah,
time, right? So it is different for me, but watching bits and pieces of that, I just love how they did that. And then tomorrow they're going to replay last year's Masters, and they're going to have Jim Nantz and Tiger Woods, and Tiger is going to be talking about certain pieces. They're doing that, but they're also showcasing the actual commentary and the full broadcast that happened during that time in conjunction. And I think that's one of the coolest things for us as sports fans is being able to just look back at history and understand different pieces. I'm sure you've been watching a lot of old basketball highlights and stuff of that as well. And same with us, even for football as well. I think that's been really fun throughout this whole quarantine session that we're going through.
definitely. I mean, I've been watching some of those like old 2000 NFL Steelers Ravens games, and you get to reminisce about those defenses. And I just watched the Spurs Heat NBA Finals Game 6. You know what I mean? There's something to be said about looking back and kind of reflecting on how like crazy some of those moments were and how it kind of shapes our view on different types of things. You know what I mean? Like when we compare defenses, we're comparing it to those 2000 Ravens defenses, or when we compare clutch shots in NBA history, we're comparing some of them to that Ray Allen shot in Game 6. You know what I mean? There's something to be said for being able to reflect on what has happened and some of the things that went on in that moment that maybe you weren't necessarily thinking about. You know what I mean? But looking back now, you see it and you're like, wow, that was actually crazy.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the difference in the style of play, even going back to 2013 with those finals, I'm just like, oh my God, paint game. No
Yeah.
threes, almost no three. There was. I guess it was
Yeah.
sort of the start of it. Not exactly, but we're getting closer to it, right? With the
Yeah.
Miami Heat team. And obviously, as I said before, that's my favorite team of all time, regardless of sport. That was Miami Heat teams. But it's so interesting, even from a basketball perspective, to think about how the game has changed so drastically.
Exactly. It's crazy to think back at, and like you said, look at some of the way schemes worked and how we were setting up defenses and stuff like that. It's fun to look back on.
All right, final topic before we have some fun here. Some Fox executives have been charged with bribery due to the World Cup bid. So, of course, this has been something that's been in the news for 4 or 5 years since they've announced the Qatar bid in 2022 about bribery, a lot of these issues with FIFA that have still really lingered. I was really surprised to see Fox executives involved into that because I know Fox got the contract for the next few World Cups. That was part of it. But how do you feel about FIFA over the last few years? Has your view changed about sort of the governing body of football or soccer?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think with the way football has gone and the way that I just feel like the way FIFA is, this is just how FIFA operates almost at this point. And it's sad to say that, but I just feel like there's so much behind the scenes stuff that we didn't know for so long, and it's kind of all coming out now. But I just feel like this is the way FIFA has been operating for so long, with money, literally run by money in different avenues, kind of shady deals and stuff like that. It sucks to see in such the number one global game, and obviously a game that you and me both love. You don't want those type of things to be involved, but I think this is just the way FIFA operates, and I think it probably will continue to operate for a short while. I just think that is kind of where we're at with this.
It's so unfortunate, and I don't know what the next steps are. I mean, even for us here in the United States, just all that stuff with the women's game and how stupid that whole case was. Just the soccer federation being just, I mean, that it's a much different situation, but just how stupid they were, and then losing their president. I mean, that's just one example from, I guess, more local perspective, but from FIFA's perspective, again, just the briberies, all this stuff. It's like, this is stuff we don't need in a sport like this, as you said, being as global as it is.
100%. Yeah.
All right, so let's go through some more fun stuff here. Let me share my screen. And then by the end of this, we're actually going to play a really fun game here. But let's first talk about these new jerseys. So the Atlanta Falcons, you can see my screen, correct?
I can.
You can? Okay. So the Atlanta Falcons new jerseys, your thoughts on these new jerseys?
My first thoughts are these the longest yard uniforms from Mean Machine.
What?
You know what I'm talking about? The Mean Machine uniforms from Longest Yard?
I have to search this up. This is from the film, right? This is the
Correct.
How are they similar? Oh! They are similar.
Yeah.
I never realized that.
They're almost identical.
I never realized that. That's bizarre.
That literally when I saw them, that's what I thought of.
That's absolutely bizarre. It's not exactly the same, but it's close.
It's close. Yeah, it's not exactly the same, but we're in the ballpark. So it's a little bit odd to me. But
oh my God, they actually got roasted for it. Look at this comparison. Oh my God. Wow.
It's a little bit cleaner though. I mean, I can see where they're going, in this new age of like uniforms and designs and stuff like that. It's a little bit more clean. So I can see it.
That's bizarre. I didn't realize that. Wow. By the way, The Longest Yard is actually a really good football film.
It is.
It's probably one of the best ones ever.
It is really good.
If you want a movie to rewatch, it's probably one of my favorites when we're looking at sports movies. And then the Bucks uniforms.
Dinner's ready. Dinner's ready.
The Bucks uniform. I mean, these kind of look the same to me. I haven't seen these. I mean,
Yeah, I like the one
besides
here
the
on the
brown
right.
ones.
I like the one on the right here. Kind of the alternate uniforms. I think they look pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, anything was better than that like mango uniform they were wearing. So
Yeah. I personally like those. And then, so we were talking about Shane and I were talking about the college football playoff in our IG live stream, and we were talking about this screenshot here of how if the playoff were 8 teams, and each year if they were 8 teams, how they would look. How do you feel about an 8-team college football playoff?
I think I said this to you before at some point, but to be honest, I'm good with 4. I know a lot of people aren't, but I just feel like there's always going to kind of be that controversy. And I understand, that teams are getting left out, but to me, the 8-team wouldn't be so bad. I guess you're giving those teams that kind of, they go undefeated, but they're not necessarily in a good conference type of thing. They get a shot at it, and I think that would probably be good just to get those type of groups a chance to be able to kind of build their programs. But I'm good with 4, to be honest.
So here's my 8-team. Here's how I would do it. This is a little confusing, so stick with me here. You have 5 Power 5 conferences.
Mm-hmm.
So all of them get automatic bids. So the champion of those 5 get automatic bids. They're in. Then the 6th seed is always a group of 5. So in this case, it would be UCF, and they would always be the 6th seed to alleviate some. Like if they were the 8th seed, Alabama would kill them every year. So I'll just put them as the 6th seed. And then you have 2 at-large bids. And all of these rankings, 1 through 4, and then 7 and 8 for the at-large bids are based off the AP poll.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's how I would do it. I think that's the easiest way to do it if you want to do 8 teams.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't mind that.
I mean, I think part of the issue is that it would cause a much bigger argument.
Yeah, that to me is like what I was saying. It's like there's always going to be that kind of discussion of teams getting left out, and there's always going to be people who are mad at like rankings and stuff like that. So that's why I say 4 is not that bad. You know what I mean? It's a lot better than what we had, where we just had like a unanimous like championship, where at least this you get some sort of a playoff, but eventually they're going to expand it. So
yeah, they have the new deals up in 2028 or 2026 actually. So by that time, I think they'll expand it.
yeah.
But I never liked the college football playoff committee. I just think it should be based off the AP poll. But
Yeah.
All right, so now we're gonna have some fun. So these 2 pictures are from Bleacher Report, and they posted this thing that I really liked. So I'm gonna give you $15. Each of us have $15.
Okay.
And we have to combine so you have $15. You have 5. So on the top, here's $5.
Uh-huh.
Here's 4. Here's 3. Here's 2. Here's 1. You have $15 to create the best player possible, finishing, jumping, defense, playmaking, and then size and athleticism. Actually, it's going down. So finishing, 5 through 1 going down, jumper, 5 through 1 going down, defense, so on and so forth. You have $15 to do so.
Okay, do I have to pick like a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, or can I just?
You have to just end up with I think
15?
4 or 5 players that combine to $15.
But I have to pick one from finishing, jumper, defense, that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I have 15?
You have $15.
Okay. This is pretty easy. I'll spend 5 on Giannis's size and athleticism because that's pretty much like the biggest cheese there is in this whole thing. So I got $10 here. I'll go Beverly's defense.
Okay. Beverly on defense. Okay, so $3 Beverly.
Oh, this is easy. Durant's jumper is pure.
Okay, so Durant on 2. I wonder if I did this right. Is it the other? Wait, I'm confused. Is it the other side? It might be the other side.
What do you mean?
So if I went it all the way down, but I wonder if it's actually this way. Do you see what I'm saying? Because actually, I don't know why I'm confusing myself. It works either way.
No,
So,
you're right. It goes this way, yeah.
Yeah. So Durant, $2.
So what do I have? $5 left?
I think so. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, you have $5 left.
And I need playmaking and finishing.
Yeah.
I'll go Harden's playmaking and then Fox is finishing.
Okay. So Harden and Fox. Okay. Let's see what I would do. Let me look for these guys here. I'm writing.
Man, that would be a great player. Imagine like Giannis is shot with Harden's playmaking, with Fox's finish. That is awesome. That is like you can't make it better. Go ahead, Robert. Try. You cannot make a better player.
I'm writing them down so we can post it up on our Instagram. Hopefully we did this correctly. Okay, I'm going to take Curry's jumper. Actually, wait. Yeah, no, I'll take Curry's jumper.
Okay.
That's $5. $4, I'll take, let's see. $4, I'll take Zion for size and athleticism. $3, I'll take, let's see. $3, so I'm confused. I have size and then, let's see. So for the $3 range, I can take Luka, right, with this?
Yeah, you can take Luka.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll take Luka Doncic.
Because then you're at 12. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure this out in process. And then $2. So Luka's done. Size and athleticism. Jumper is done. So I need a 2 and a 1. So I'll take. Yeah, I'll take. Let's see. I already did playmaking. So I have finishing and defense left. Oh my God, Leonard's up there. Jeez. I'll take my boy Bam.
Bam's defense.
Bam, and then for the $1,
you got John Collins.
I have to take John Collins. I think you probably have the better team just from the sense that you have Giannis and Durant and Harden. But
no. That's the thing, though. I thought it wasn't. You're not picking a team. You're trying to create like the best player.
Best combined player, yeah.
Right? That's what we're doing. Yeah. Combined player.
Yeah, you're just trying to create the best player out of all of those people.
Yeah, but you've got Zion's body with Curry's shot. So I mean that's pretty lethal.
So I want to make sure we did this right. So from finishing we're going down, jumper we're going down, defense down, playmaking down, size down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was. So I'm trying to confirm this. So which one do you not agree with? Do you not agree that the fact that Doncic is a $3 player and Harden's a $2 player?
I mean, I think Simmons should be below both of them.
Yeah.
And I think Durant should be like above Thompson and Lillard.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they did this.
Some of these are like, I don't get. And why is Jimmy Butler on finishing?
Where would you put Jimmy Butler?
Defense, if anything.
He's a pretty good layup artist.
He's a good finisher, but I just mean there's a lot of good finishers that. Siakam is Siakam really like a finisher per se, or?
I
guess I have a problem with the finishing group as a whole. The finishing group as a whole, I'm like, I don't really get that.
Well, Westbrook's obviously a $5 player.
Yeah, I get that. After that, I'm like,
What about De'Aaron Fox? I
He's
put De'Aaron
good.
Fox in the
He's
finishing.
good, but I mean, I could think of a couple other finishers.
Who else is not on this list that's not at all on this list for the finishing side?
Let me think. Kemba?
Kemba, yeah, that's a good call.
Then I got, let's see here. I mean, John Wall when healthy. I mean, if we're
I mean,
picking
you can't put John Wall. I think we're kind of over John Wall.
completely healthy.
Bradley Beal on this list?
Nope.
Why isn't he here?
That's a good
And
question.
wouldn't he be here for a jumper?
I would. I mean, you got a pretty good list of jumpers. I mean, Duncan Robinson, he could probably replace, but
I love Duncan Robinson, by the way.
he's a sniper.
He's
a
pretty
sniper.
solid. Why is Marjanovic here at the $1 size?
Because you got all the size but no athleticism. You got complete size.
And then Mitchell Robinson, I'm so upset that the Knicks just aren't using him correctly.
I know. There's so much potential there. It's just really unfortunate.
It frustrates me. Draymond's kind of fallen off, but defensively he's still quite good.
Yeah.
I don't like the whole Bam disrespectfulness, though. Bam, I think, is actually a really, really good player, and I just don't get why people don't really look at him.
He's good. I just don't think you can, like – you're not going to put him over Beverly, Gobert, or Leonard.
Well, no, but I'm just saying in general, I think Bam is, like, so undervalued for how good he is for Miami.
Yeah, that's true. Bam doesn't – I mean, he got a little credit this year getting that All-Star nod, but –
Yeah, he should have gotten that nod for sure. And then De'Aaron Fox is a guy that I think still has a little bit more development left, but I really like his skill set too.
Yeah, I think he's going to be good here. Pretty sure.
Any player that you want to highlight from this list that you kind of enjoy watching?
No, I think you're right. I think if I had to pick a player that doesn't get a lot of credit, it would be Fox. I think that dude's going to be good, and I think he's just starting to kind of scratch the potential. I think he's going to be really good.
All right. Yeah, it's a really fun game. I hope we did that correctly. But
yeah, that was fun. I like that. I didn't see that.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a little fun game. We'll try and do more of these games as we continue on through the show, especially as these sports topics start to sort of drift away a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. So how has quarantine been during the weekend? Is it a little bit different than the weekdays?
Yeah. I mean, not a whole lot. I kind of lost track of the days, so I'm kind of at the same spot I've been at. So not a whole lot going on, but you know how it goes.
It seems like one whole long day almost.
It does. It just seems like the days just keep running into each other.
And on top of that, for me, I feel like I'm more busy. Because I'm home, I have nothing to do. I feel like I'm actually doing – well, I think it's different because, like, for me, I'm doing school as well.
That's true.
So it makes it so that I'm, like, always having, like, oh, this assignment, this thing, that thing. But, yeah, if I didn't have, like, school, I don't know what would be going on. I think I would just be going a little bit.
I know, I feel. Yeah.
But I think I'd be okay. I'd be okay. All right, good to have you on. Thanks for joining us here on such short notice. It was great having you on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad I could make it on. Sorry we couldn't get on there last night, but I always enjoy being on the show. Always good to talk some sports with you, and I'm like I said before, I'm glad you're staying healthy, you're staying good. So
same with you, and
good to catch up.
Same for everyone else out there too.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Shane should be back next week, and we'll do some fun content for you guys throughout the week as well. Thank you very much again, Cole, for joining us, and stay safe and healthy out there, everybody.
Yep. Hope everyone's staying safe. Thanks again, Robert.